It was supposed to be the happiest day of their lives, a dream wedding, a perfect couple, a love story that had captivated everyone who knew them. The bride glowed in her white gown, the groom beamed with pride, and their loved ones gathered to celebrate a future filled with love and promise. But as the music played and glasses clinked in celebration, an uninvited guest arrived, shattering the illusion of perfection. In an instant, the joyous laughter was drowned out by the deafening sound of gunfire. Screams filled the air. Blood pooled across the dance floor. The wedding dress, once a symbol of purity and new beginnings, was stained in crimson. And as the horror unfolded, one thing became clear: this wasn't a random act of violence. This was personal. This was revenge. What could drive someone to unleash such carnage on what was meant to be a day of love and unity? How does a relationship so full of ambition and passion unravel into a scene of unthinkable horror? Love, obsession, and betrayal collided in the most devastating way imaginable. And for one woman, the pain of rejection was too much to bear. If she couldn't have him, no one could. Before we dive into this jaw-dropping case, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more mind-blowing tales of love, lies, and deadly betrayals. Demonte Caldwell was the kind of man people respected. At 31 years old, he had built a career as an Ohio Correctional officer, earning a reputation for his professionalism and discipline. Colleagues admired his work ethic, his commanding presence, and his ability to handle even the most dangerous inmates with a calm authority. Outside of work, he was known for his charm, charisma that could disarm even the most skeptical person in the room. He carried himself like a man with a plan, someone who knew exactly where he was headed in life. But beneath the surface, Demonte was living a double life, one that would eventually unravel in the most horrific way imaginable. Kymora Langston, on the other hand, was everything people aspired to be. At 29, she was a dedicated nurse, beloved by patients and respected by colleagues. She was intelligent, independent, and carried herself with a quiet confidence that made her stand out. She had spent years building a career that not only provided stability, but also allowed her to help others, a trait that only made people love her more. And when she met Demonte, she believed she had found the missing piece in her life. He was strong, ambitious, and made her feel safe. From the moment they got together, she was convinced that he was her soulmate. For 4 years, their love blossomed. They built a life together, supporting each other's dreams and pushing each other to be better. They traveled, laughed, and shared intimate moments that made Kymora believe they were unbreakable. She envisioned a future filled with love, success, and eventually, a family of their own. And then, after years of waiting, Demonte finally got down on one knee and asked her to be his wife. Their love story felt like something out of a fairy tale. They were a power couple, both successful, both attractive, both admired by those around them. When Demonte proposed, it wasn't just a private moment between two people in love. It was a spectacle, a grand romantic gesture that was captured on video and shared across social media. Friends, family, and strangers alike flooded the comments with praise, calling them the perfect couple, a match made in heaven. Their engagement was a celebration of black love, of two successful individuals coming together to build something even greater. But love stories don't always have happy endings. Kymora had no idea that the man she was planning to spend the rest of her life with was keeping secrets. Secrets that could destroy everything they had built. As she picked out wedding dresses and imagined their future together, Demonte was still tied to his past, to a woman who refused to be forgotten. A woman who saw Kymora not as a bride, but as an obstacle. And as their wedding day approached, the cracks in their perfect love story began to show. Demonte Caldwell had built a life that most people envied. A respected career, a beautiful fiancée, and a future filled with promise. But what no one knew, what he fought to bury beneath his polished exterior, was a dark and dangerous secret that threatened to destroy everything. Her name was Taniyah Ross. At 27, Taniyah was no stranger to chaos. She had spent 7 years behind bars, serving time for nearly stabbing her ex-boyfriend to death in a fit of uncontrollable rage. Violence was in her nature. It burned beneath her skin, always threatening to erupt. But behind the sharp edges and volatile outbursts, there was something else, an unwavering belief that she was meant for more. And for a while, she believed that more had come in the form of Demonte Caldwell. Taniyah had always been possessive, obsessive, manipulative. Their affair wasn't supposed to happen. Demonte was a correctional officer, bound by law, by ethics, by every rule that was meant to keep order inside those prison walls. But rules had never stopped him before. What started as fleeting glances and hushed conversations soon spiraled into something far more dangerous. It was reckless, forbidden, and intoxicating. Taniyah became his escape from the rigid discipline of his career, a secret indulgence in a world that expected him to be perfect. But for Taniyah, it was never just an affair. It was everything. She convinced herself that Demonte was her savior, the man who saw her beyond her mistakes, beyond her record, beyond the walls that confined her. She didn't just want him, she needed him. He was her future, her redemption, her reason to believe that she wasn't broken beyond repair. And when she became pregnant with his child, it only solidified the delusion in her mind. But prison was no place for a mother. And fate, cruel, unforgiving fate, had no intention of letting her hold on to the one thing that made her feel whole. The fight started over something small, something stupid, an argument with another inmate, a disagreement that spiraled into violence. One punch turned into another, and before Taniyah even realized what was happening, she was on the ground, pain ripping through her body in unbearable waves. She knew. She just knew. By the time the prison medical staff reached her, it was already too late. The baby was gone. And so was the last piece of hope she had left. Taniyah never forgave Demonte for not being there. Never forgave him for moving on, for living his life outside while she was trapped in a cell, bleeding out the only thing that had ever truly belonged to her. She blamed him. Hated him. But even in her hatred she couldn't let him go. And then, finally, after 7 long years, she was free. By the time she was released on parole, Demonte had already built a new life with Kymora Langston, a woman who had everything that Taniyah felt was rightfully hers. But that didn't stop her. That couldn't stop her. She made it her mission to pull Demonte back into her world. And he let her. Despite the wedding invitations, the social media posts, the perfect life he had built with Kymora, Demonte still couldn't resist her. He met her in secrets in motels, in parking lots, late at night when no one would suspect a thing. And every time, she reminded him of who she was, what they had, and why she would never let him go. And then, she got pregnant again, this time, determined that nothing would take her child away from her. For 9 months she carried the proof that Demonte was still hers, the proof that no matter how much he tried to erase her, she would always be part of his life. And when their daughter was born, she thought, hoped, that maybe, just maybe, Demonte would finally see her the way she saw him. But Demonte was done. He gave her the bare minimum. A few dollars here. A quick visit there. But his heart, his devotion, his future? That belonged to Kymora. The wedding was already planned, the invitations sent, the world celebrating a love story that didn't include Taniyah. And no matter how many times she called, texted, or begged, he always had the same response. I moved on. You need to do the same. But Taniyah didn't believe in moving on. She believed in payback. Demonte thought he could silence her, shut her out like she never existed. He thought love could erase the past. But he was wrong. Because Taniyah Ross was not the kind of woman you could forget. And as the wedding day drew closer, she made a decision. If Demonte wanted to leave her behind, if he wanted to pretend she never mattered, then he would have to pay the price. The morning of Demonte Caldwell's wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. He had won. He had chosen Kymora. He had built the future he wanted, and in just a few hours she would walk down the aisle, and everything would be perfect. But perfection was a lie. His phone buzzed. Again. And again. Missed calls. Voicemails. Messages left unread. Taniyah. Demonte didn't need to hear what she had to say, he already knew. The night before, he had made one last mistake. One last visit. One last moment of weakness. And now she knew for certain what she had only suspected before. Demonte was leaving her behind. Forever. But Taniyah Ross wasn't the kind of woman you left behind. By the time Demonte was standing at the altar, waiting for his bride, Taniyah was already preparing for war. She knew exactly what she was going to do. She had spent years giving him her body, her trust, her soul. She had bled for him. She had lost for him. And now he was standing up there, smiling, looking at her, his wife, like she was the only woman in the world? No. If Taniyah couldn't have him, no one could. She loaded the sawed-off shotgun, tucking it beneath the folds of her coat. The hunting knife gleamed as she turned it over in her hand, the blade sharp enough to carve bone. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was justice. The moment Kymora said, "I do," Taniyah was already on her way. By the time guests were toasting the happy couple, she was standing just outside the venue, the shotgun burning against her skin. And when Demonte and Kymora took the floor for their first dance, Taniyah stepped inside. At first, no one noticed her. The room was filled with music, laughter, love. Kymora's white dress shimmered under the chandeliers as she smiled up at her new husband. Demonte held her close, whispering something in her ear that made her laugh. Taniyah felt something snap inside her. She lifted the gun. The blast shattered the moment into a nightmare. Kymora's body jerked violently as the bullet tore into her chest, the white silk of her gown blooming red in an instant. Screams. Chaos. The music cut out, but the echoes of the gunshots still rang through the air. Demonte barely had time to react before the next shot ripped into his stomach. Once. Twice. He hit the floor, gasping for breath, clutching his wounds as the blood spread across his crisp white tuxedo. All around them, guests ran for their lives. Tables overturned. Glass shattered. Some ducked under furniture, others bolted for the exits. But Taniyah didn't move. She walked through the carnage slowly, calmly, as if she were simply taking a stroll. She ignored the screams, the terror, the sobbing guests begging for their lives. Her eyes never left Demonte. She crouched beside him, the shotgun still clutched in her hands. He tried to speak. To beg. To apologize. To say something, anything, that might stop her. But she only leaned in, her lips brushing against his ear as she whispered the last words he would ever hear. "You should have picked me." The final shot silenced him forever. Blood pooled beneath his lifeless body, soaking into the floorboards. But Taniyah wasn't done. She turned back to Kymora, her rival. Even in death, Kymora looked beautiful. Her delicate fingers were still outstretched, as if reaching for Demonte in her last moments. That wasn't enough for Taniyah. She pulled out the hunting knife. And then, in front of everyone, she stabbed the woman who had stolen her life. Again. 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 By the time police stormed the venue, Taniyah was kneeling in a pool of blood, rocking back and forth, clutching the knife like a child holding onto a beloved toy. Her dress, once an elegant deep red, was now soaked through with gore. She didn't run. She didn't fight. She simply smiled. Because in her mind, she had already won. The massacre at Demonte and Kymora's wedding sent shockwaves across the nation. It wasn't just a tragedy, it was a spectacle. A real-life horror story that unfolded in front of hundreds of witnesses, leaving behind a blood-stained wedding venue and an even bigger mess in the court of public opinion. News outlets wasted no time dissecting every sordid detail. The story had everything: love, betrayal, obsession, and a brutal, unforgettable ending. It was the kind of headline that gripped the public and refused to let go. Wedding Day Massacre. Bride and groom slaughtered by jealous ex-lover. Love triangle turns deadly. Felon kills groom and bride in cold blood. You should have picked me. Murderer's chilling last words before execution-style killing. Kymora became a symbol of tragic love, a young nurse full of promise who was gunned down in the prime of her life, a woman who never saw it coming. Her pictures flooded social media, smiling in her engagement photos, glowing in her wedding dress just minutes before she was murdered. Taniyah, however, was a different story. To the world, she was the monster in the wedding hall. A cold-blooded killer. A woman who couldn't handle rejection and turned a celebration into a bloodbath. She was called deranged, psycho, unhinged. Commentators labeled her a jealous ex who deserved to rot in prison, or worse. But as the story unfolded, not everyone saw her that way. Demonte's family was devastated, but they weren't surprised. His sister admitted on live television that they knew about Taniyah, and some even warned him that playing with fire would get him burned. His best friend made it clear, Demonte had been reckless. He had kept one foot in the past while building a future with Kymora, never fully closing the door on Taniyah. He had tried to juggle both women, and in the end, it cost him his life. Taniyah's former cellmates also had something to say. She was possessive, obsessive. If she loved you, she owned you. She didn't just want Demonte. She needed him. It was him or nothing. He thought he could walk away from her. He was dead the moment he put that ring on Kymora's finger. The internet exploded with debates. Some argued that Demonte led Taniyah on, that he gave her false hope even while planning a wedding with another woman. That he kept her close, visiting her in prison, sneaking around even after she got out, giving her just enough to keep her believing she had a chance. He knew she was crazy, and he still kept sleeping with her. She had his baby while he was planning a whole wedding. What did he think was gonna happen? Demonte played a dangerous game, and it cost 3 lives, his, Kymora's, and the daughter who now has no parents. But others saw no excuse. She's a killer, plain and simple. He didn't deserve to die for trying to move on. Taniyah was violent before Demonte. He didn't make her this way, she was already a monster. A woman like her doesn't need a reason. She would have killed him no matter what. In the days following the wedding massacre, the nation remained divided. Was Taniyah Ross a victim of manipulation, driven to madness by a man who played with her heart? Or was she simply a ticking time bomb waiting for the right moment to explode? The search for justice began the moment the gunfire stopped. As wedding guests screamed and fled in terror, police swarmed the blood-soaked venue, finding Taniyah Ross sitting in a pool of red, calm, eerily still. The shotgun lay discarded beside her, and in her hands she clutched the hunting knife she had used to repeatedly stab Kymora's lifeless body. Officers approached with caution, weapons drawn, expecting a struggle. But Taniyah didn't resist. She simply sat there, rocking back and forth, her dress soaked in Kymora's blood. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared ahead, lost in a world of her own making. When the lead officer demanded she drop the knife, she did. When they handcuffed her and pulled her to her feet, she followed. And when they asked why she did it, she finally spoke. He was supposed to be mine. It wasn't a confession of guilt. It was a statement of fact. In Taniyah's mind, this had never been murder, it had been justice. At the police station, detectives wasted no time building their case. The evidence was undeniable. Security footage captured Taniyah storming into the wedding hall, shotgun in hand. The camera caught the sheer horror as Kymora collapsed in her dress, blood seeping into the white fabric. It recorded the moment Demonte fell, clutching his stomach, gasping for breath, and it showed Taniyah, standing over him, whispering something before firing the final, execution-style shot. Witnesses, hundreds of them, provided chilling testimonies. The guests, the wedding party, even Demonte's own mother, who had watched her son die in front of her. The prosecution didn't have to search for proof. It was all there, laid out in graphic, undeniable detail. The question wasn't whether Taniyah did it. The question was, why? The trial was a national spectacle. Courtroom seats were filled every single day, and millions watched from home. The world wanted to see how this tragic, twisted love story would end. Taniyah's defense team knew they had little hope of proving her innocence. The evidence was overwhelming. So, instead, they tried to paint her as a victim of circumstance. She was emotionally unstable. She suffered a traumatic miscarriage while incarcerated. She was manipulated and discarded by the man she loved. They argued that Taniyah hadn't planned to kill anyone that day, that she had acted in a state of temporary insanity, overwhelmed by grief and rejection. But the prosecution had one response. If this was insanity, why did she bring a gun? Why did she bring a knife? Why did she reload after the first shots? Why did she whisper to Demonte before she pulled the trigger? They painted her not as a woman consumed by heartbreak, but as a cold, calculating killer who had planned every moment of the massacre. And then, there was her behavior in court. Taniyah showed no remorse. She smirked when gruesome details were recounted. She rolled her eyes when witnesses broke down on the stand. And when footage of Demonte's murder was played for the jury, she simply watched, expressionless. In the end, the jury didn't hesitate. Guilty. On all counts. Sentencing was swift. The judge called Taniyah's actions monstrous, calculated, and irredeemable. You didn't just kill a man. You didn't just kill his wife. You killed an entire future, a life they never got to live, a family that will never exist, memories that will never be made. For that, she would pay the ultimate price. Death. As the sentence was read, Demonte's mother sobbed uncontrollably. Kymora's family clutched each other, shaking with grief. And through it all, Taniyah didn't flinch. Instead, as guards led her away, she turned to Demonte's grieving mother, locked eyes with her, smiled and whispered one final, "At least now, he's mine forever." This case is a chilling reminder that love, when entangled with obsession, deception, and betrayal, ca. Demonte Caldwell thought he could erase his past, build a new life, and leave his secrets buried. But Taniyah Ross refused to be forgotten. She wasn't just a woman scorned, she was a woman consumed. Consumed by the promises he made, the lies he told, and the future she believed they were meant to have. And when that future was stolen from her, she made sure no one else would have it either. In the end, 3 lives were destroyed. Kymora, an innocent woman who believed she had found her forever. Demonte, a man who thought he could outrun his past. And Taniyah, a woman so blinded by love and rage that she left nothing but blood and unanswered questions in her wake. Was she a victim of a cruel deception, or was she always destined to be a murderer in disguise? And more importantly, could this tragedy have been avoided if Demonte had never crossed that forbidden line? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if this story shocked you, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more cases where love turns deadly.